All right, hello everyone. So here's our recorded lecture for the readings for November 10th. Excuse me. You have two chapters to read, cognitive and behavioral, cognitive interventions, behavioral interventions. So I'm going to do this in two parts. The first part is going to be behavioral. The reason for that is historical partly, that there was behavioral approaches before there were cognitive approaches. So the behavioral was a little bit of a reaction to the Freudian that had been present up till the 50s and 60s, and then people started applying Skinner and Pavlov principles to treatment. So there's going to be two parts. I'm going to do the behavioral first, so cognitive will be in the second part. So the first thing is you're going to hear what probably nowadays, unless you go to a conference of behavior therapists, is what we might consider old school. And I think you've heard me before, I think numerous times, complain about the fact that people lump together behavioral and cognitive, and they're absolutely two different theories. So, but because they're both, well, supposedly both based on learning models, which the cognitive really isn't. They say they are. A lot of the cognitive people were behavioral people. At least, well, they're all gone now, probably most of those people. But when I was a grad student, this was still sort of a hot issue of behavioral versus cognitive. And long story that I'm sure will bore you like grandpa's stories, but they did not like each other at the conferences. But the cognitive people took over. They changed the name of the organization, this international organization. It used to be AABT, Association for the Advancement of Behavior Therapy, and now it's the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapy. So they sort of took over, basically. So I want to clarify the difference, again, between the behavioral model and the cognitive model. And I'm even more horrified that the counseling textbook in the behavioral model, the behavioral chapter, does not mention the ABC model. There's another video I was tempted to have you watch that I would only do this for an hour or less. The video is 50 minutes. It does an overview of cognitive behavioral therapy. I had a terrible time finding what I considered a really decent YouTube type training on cognitive behavioral therapy that separated them, that talked about the ABC behavioral model versus the ABCD cognitive model. And there's one by an expert that I have that I might use with my undergrads or with you guys next semester. She does not distinguish between the ABC and ABCD model and lumps them together. Is horrifying to someone like me. But anyway, so let's just clarify the behavioral model. And you heard a lot of this when we did the case conceptualization. So I want to go over this. I have this little form that I actually made up because I cannot find this kind of thing anymore. It's just unbelievable. I mean, this stuff is if you went into autism treatment or ABA therapy, right, which is very big with autism and ADHD, the ABC model, you'd see lots of it. But in terms of like adult non-autism treatments, not so much. It is the basis for social skills treatment and can be the basis for, there's a type of depression treatment that's behavioral, any anxiety treatment. There are behavioral anxiety treatments. So, but it's rarely specified in terms of the basic model. Let's do the behavioral model first. ABC is a behavioral model, also called a functional analysis when you apply this to a client's problems. The A stands for, in the behavioral model, antecedents. I know you read this in the chapter I assigned at the beginning of the semester for whatever learning chapter from an intro book you're supposed to have read. And in clinical terms, it's really often referred to as situation or the trigger. All right, and that's particularly true in substance abuse treatment. And another term I should have put in there was cue, C-U-E, cue, the cue for the behavior. And in this model, Skinner model, this could be applied to Pavlov. I'm not going to go into how this integrate this with Pavlov. The behavior is controlled by the consequences. Don't get mixed up with the word consequences like something negative. Consequences just means anything that happens after the behavior. Because what happens after a behavior is what controls whether that behavior gets done again in the situation A that occurred, where there was a B and a C. All right? There can be positive reinforcers, they can be negative reinforcers. Both are rewards in a sense, right? So if that B makes something uncomfortable go away, it's still a reinforcer. The C is still a reinforcer, right? So you take a drink, anxiety goes down. That's a negative reinforced behavior. And so drinking is more likely in whatever situation, feeling angry or anxious, presence of other people, you'd want to be, and the book does cover, specifics about what the situation is. And it did with that earlier chapter. I was so impressed with. They did such a nice functional analysis description, anyway, of what you look for. But that was in the assessment chapter. So anything can happen after behavior. There are punishers and there are reinforcers or rewards. The reward can be not just a positive thing, but relief of a negative thing. So you have to know the difference between a positive reinforcer and a negative reinforcer. Negative reinforcement is not punishment. And you need to know that from here on in. So the behavior is controlled by the consequences. You do a functional analysis, you try to figure out, whether it's drinking, using drugs, anxiety-related behaviors, what's the reinforcer that's going on? And that's a functional analysis. You figure out, if it's ADHD, the kid is doing this in this situation, and what's the reinforcer? For ADHD, it could be, and it gets to expend energy, gets to relieve feeling cooped up. Lots of other things can happen. Gets to leave the room, dealing with a teacher, maybe his favorite principal, he loves the principal talked to him for 15 minutes. And the key thing with working with kids and cats, any attention, negative or positive, is reinforcing. Right? There's no such thing, let me say this better, there's no such thing as negative attention with a kid, especially when a kid is deprived of positive attention. So one of the ways you look like a genius is, parent says, well, he does this, and then I turn around, I give him a lecture. Okay, well, you just reinforced him, just like when Blue is out in the back barking all the time, and you open the door, say, Blue, be quiet. Well, you just reinforce Blue barking because Blue doesn't want to be out there all alone. He loves your attention. It's reinforcing. So that's a big breakthrough for a lot of parents when you help walk them through this pattern and what might be maintaining some of the negative child behaviors, okay? So one of the other aspects of this and how it applies to therapy, and this is kind of how I think. Now, I think people have a lot of fears, and they are acting out of fears, avoidance motivations. It's just negative reinforcement. PTSD would be related to that, where there's conditioned fears around certain things, and so they act in a way that avoids those fears, and that's reinforcing or makes anxiety go down. The other thing you always look for is what the person's doing, the B, but also if I did a complicated version of this, it would be like a B with a little subscript 0. What's the person not doing? And there's two reasons someone's not doing something that's better. All right, because a lot of times the consequences are things that everybody wants and does, right? Relief of anxiety, social connection, fun. I mean, they're doing lots of things that feel good or would be considered reinforcing, a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. Whatever human equivalents of the pellet coming out of the bar, out of the Skinner box for the rat. There's lots of things you upgrade this to humans. And a lot of times people are doing behaviors, they have some drinks, makes me feel better. Well, yeah, so what other things could you do that make you feel better? And that could include all kinds of cognitive and behavioral skills that are more adaptive, and the book uses the term maladaptive and adaptive. The reason it's maladaptive is because it's got too many negative consequences, punishers that aren't working. Keep in mind that there can be punishers and reinforcers occurring at the same time or at different times after behavior. The ones closest in time are going to affect it, and the stronger ones will determine whether it's reinforcing or punishing, reducing the chance of that occurring again. So I'm always thinking, what's the person not doing? One reason they may not be doing it, they would never learned it in their family. And there's a lot of things about intimacy skills and relationship skills, social skills, things that make people generally happy. Think of how this would apply to depression, right? Having friends, having a good time, having close, intimate relationships. And one other probably primary reinforcer is belonging, a sense of belonging. So people may never have learned that because they had a more crazy family than usual, or they may have learned it but it was inhibited by punishment, and so there's fear attached to it. So that's how I think. What's the person doing? What's they not doing? Are they not doing something more adaptive because they never learned it, or because they have fear when they do it, right? Well, if I talk to people, my dad used to slap me, right? If I tell them how I feel. So as a person who maybe has tremendous difficulties expressing emotions, think of the cases we went over in the case conceptualization. Anyway, so that's the ABC model, basically. And that's how you would do a functional analysis. And that's really how I think with clients. Now, I do use cognitive techniques sometimes because they're just really effective. And that doesn't mean the model's right, because there's a relationship between your beliefs and your feelings and behaviors. But I think it's what you learned causes how you think. All right, so the way you act, your thinking reflects that, and there's a little bit of a way of reversing that process, but I don't think that's mainly how the mind works, but it's still useful. So that's it. I'm going to start the chapter. Let me give you a beach scene while I go over this. Oh, that's not the one. That is sort of the one. Hold on. Anyway, so the behavioral interventions chapter. They explain this, but why there's not an ABC in there? I know this stuff must be so boring to most of you. That kind of stuff. And I hope this stuff is mildly interesting. So Pavlov and Skinner, and then Bandura, they mention. Well, Bandura was a behavioral rebel, right? So Skinner did not like Bandura, because Bandura said you don't have to have reinforcement to learn something. You just learn it by observing and modeling. And I believe that that's true to some extent. But it's very anti-behavioral. They make it sound, oh, they're all buddies, all these behavioral people. Well, it took a while for the Skinner types to accept that Bandura may have something. So on page 182, they talk about maladaptive behavior. Nice definition of that. The beliefs sort of behind behavioral, which is this section's good. Anyway. Behavior can be weakened or eliminated. Adaptive behavior can be strengthened or increased through the use of psychological principles of learning, right? So all this is based on what's called learning models. And that's what you read usually, a learning chapter is about learning models. And they have some degree of empirical support. So there's a lot of research in this stuff in terms of how it works, of how well it works. All right, and then a nice statement, they say the behavior is functionally related to the situation, right? What they say, the specific events that precede and follow these situations. So why that's reinforcing is probably relates to the situation, right? To the A, the trigger. Conflict with boss, drinking, feel better. Well, yeah, I feel better because the conflict with the boss has raised unpleasant feelings or was frustrating. Okay? A very scientific approach to therapy. So goals of behavioral intervention. Assertion. There's nothing too complicated. The skills are pretty good. The only behavioral intervention skills, like skills for a therapist, one of the few times this section actually I find useful, but some of the other chapters are useful sections. So, like how you define behaviors, you got to be able to break behaviors down too. When someone says, "I'm anxious when I go to a party," well, what do you do? What do you not do? It takes some skill to kind of help people learn how to think behaviorally. That's particularly true in parent training. So a lot of parent training is basically behavioral operant training. All right, goal setting, visualization, things you have to be good at. Contracting, true for the management, supporting and reinforcing. Because you want to use, as I try to do with you, I try to use behavioral concepts in training you in skills, just as you would train clients also to become good at this. Right? All right. All right. So describing behaviors, I don't really have much to say about the other parts of that section. They talk about using behavioral interventions. I think I'm only going to want you to learn the systematic desensitization and the skills training stuff. I want you to focus on more some of the social modeling, in vivo modeling. I mean, it's good to know symbolic modeling. I mean, you're not going to do modeling without doing skills training, right? Where you have the person run through and practice a particular skill. So that comes up in the role-playing behavioral rehearsal. Now, the desirable characteristics of the models, because you are going to use modeling. Like you may show a client how to send back a Big Mac in McDonald's, right? How to say, bring it up in the counter and say, look, is pickles on it? I asked for no pickles. But because why people go into Burger King, McDonald's, and ask for certain things, it's not what they're built for, right? It's just, so anyway, that's a different story, I guess. And what I did not see in here, maybe I missed it, was what I learned as the difference between a mastery model and a coping model. Do you want to look like James Bond with social skills when you do the modeling? No, you want to do something that the client can relate to. I mean, that's how a lot of TV commercials, they want actors in these commercials that you can relate to. And if you're like James Bond, being smooth and cool and suave and sending the Big Mac back, well, the client, when they're watching you, they'll be like, oh, I could never do that, or whatever they do. But there's a more primal almost process of how much can they relate to you doing that. So coping model, mastery model, yeah, so that is in there. But I always try to keep that in mind, try to be realistic when I do my modeling or skills training. So role play and behavior rehearsal came from a lot of other things here. They mentioned the psychodrama, fixed role therapy. I don't remember that. I'm sure I knew it at one point. Theory is that the Kelly personality theory. Anyway, it was long ago in a galaxy far, far away. So these are common elements of role play. We're gonna go into this next semester, actual skills training. But I do want you to get a sense of it. use shaping processes. You got to know your Skinner. You use some shaping processes. So they talk about the anxiety situation, inappropriate times, when to use the skill. I mean, that's another whole part of the anything behavioral, right? Is you don't just train people like little robots. They have to know when and when not to use the skills, when to modify them. Okay. So graduated practice attempts. All right. I haven't been too graduated in my getting you practice attempts on the role plays for reflective listening, but generally, in next semester you're going to all these things are manualized. So you'll have a manual that it goes over all this stuff and then says exactly how to do assertion training, how to do conflict resolution training, little skills, expressing negative emotions, expressing positive emotions. Manuals are full of exactly to do that with pages for each skill, how you work with the client. But some of the things they all share is what they're talking about here, which is, you don't go for the toughest situation. I'm going to confront my father about his alcoholism through my life. That's not your first skill you work on, probably. There's probably others in terms of, say, assertion at work or with partners or things like that. So um, the goals have them when you move from one scenario to the next. I mean, some of this is some sort of common sense. The key part is you have to believe this is Skinner stuff. So that means, you don't just do one time. You have to keep doing it like anything. Like if you're a golfer, you go to the driving range. If you're a batter, you get in the batting cage. You got to keep doing it and get better and better and better each time. So that's why I'll have you, if we do a role play on some skill, say, no, just do it again. Do it again. And just if you do it well, that's even more reason to do it again. All right. So that's all talked about there. Feedback, you get a lot of positive feedback, constructive feedback. Try this, watch the tone of your voice. But when we go over the manual next semester, you're going to see how this is all done. You can videotape, that's helpful. Yep, so components of skill training, assertion training. I think that's all pretty straightforward. Case of Jack, skills training. Okay. Operant condition interventions. All right, so now they start to go into more really technique-y stuff. So relaxation training is important. You may do it. It's not something you would do just as an only treatment for anxiety. I can't think of situations where you would do that. It's usually integrated into other treatments, and it's integrated into the systematic desensitization treatment. So, and we're going to do this next semester, progressive muscle relaxation. So you basically would have the person they're going to learn to relax each muscle set in their body. So it goes hands, wrists, biceps, shoulders. So I don't have to mess with the camera too much. And you have them tighten the muscle, then relax it. It's more technical. This tighten it, then relax it. And you do that for each one. At some point, it takes weeks and weeks. The client will be able to say to themselves a cue word like relax or calm, all right? And their whole body will relax. Because what you're doing is you have them do it twice. You go through all your muscles. You say, hand, I want you to tighten your fist, 75% of tightness, all right? Put your hand in fist, tighten the muscles in your hand, 75% of tightness. Feel the tightness, feel the tension. Notice the tension. Now relax your hand. Feel the relaxation. Notice the difference between the feelings of relaxation in your hand and the tension you felt before. You let go any tension, let it go a little bit more, a little bit more. All right, again, tighten your hand, 75% of tightness. Feel the tension. Hold it for a few seconds. There's times that are standard, like 15 seconds or whatever. And then let it go. Feel the relaxation. Feel any tension in your hand. Let the muscle relax more and more. All right. Next, we're going to do bicep. Do that. And do shoulders, right? So have people go like this. Feel the tension in your shoulders. Notice the tension. Now let it go. So you get them sort of trained up to kind of notice tension too. So they do that for a week, right? You just have them, they'll listen to, we had cassettes, and now they're seeing CDs and DVDs, and I don't think anybody uses those anymore. So I'm sure there's plenty of apps. So you do that for a week or two, check with your client, and then you have them do just once. Tighten your hand, blah, 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 relax. And that's it. Do that for a few weeks. Where you just go through each, shoulder, stomach, legs, calves, every muscle. So you do that. They're also saying calm and doing some relaxation induction thing, visual image. Imagine that you're in the most calm place, the most relaxing place you can be. You do this big induction, and they're feeling totally calm. All right. So eventually, you do the twice for a couple weeks, once, a couple of weeks, maybe longer. I've done this a while. I don't remember my initial training, and it had very specific times and lengths and all this stuff. And then you just have them go through their muscles without tension. Say, okay, notice any tension in your hand and let it go. Just relax. You go to the bicep or shoulders and all the face muscles, the way you do it with your lips, get muscles around there. You do all kinds of things, get muscles in your jaw muscles, which are big ones for headaches, right? Some of these things in here. So, and they describe it there. So I do want to talk about systematic desensitization. The self-management one is really good. I'm going to let you read that and ask me questions, but that takes a lot of planning. It's a very Skinnerian approach, but a lot of it is the planning, the stepwise kinds of things, the rewarding yourself. And as they talk about this, what they call reactance, even just measuring something, right? Well, how many times a day do you swear? So you start noticing that it starts to go down. Even that's got a little bit of an impact, all right? There's commitment to it. So that's all good stuff, the self-management thing. But I am going to want you to know systematic desensitization. So they do a pretty good job here in the book. So what you do is you take a feared situation and you create 10 levels of things related to that situation that go from lowest anxiety to highest anxiety. And we used to do them on index cards, if you even know what that is. And for each, and you order them with the client. So client has a fear of bridges. You could do social situations too, right? So you don't break down that situation into 10 things, but you can change to similar situations or the time before the situation. So the first number one index card, if you're using index cards, would be you and your client would talk and you could say, okay, so if you have a fear of dinner parties, all right. So number one, you have you're going to meet your best friend at McDonald's for a half an hour, right? And the client says, yeah, that's like nothing. So use your SUD scale, 0 to 100. It's in the book. And say, okay, it's not a 0, so what would be a 10 with that? Well, it's crowded. Suppose it's crowded in the McDonald's. I might have a 10, right? So I'm just going to sit outside now anyway. If you can even sit anywhere in a McDonald's. So it's just a 10. So you would have them, you would start with that one. And the second one might be a meeting, not so, a classmate to talk about class at McDonald's. Well, that's a 20. I'm going to meet 3 friends at a restaurant. That might be a 40. And you keep building up, and you can say, and you can even do one of them as like it's 2 hours before that meeting. All right, so you can vary it on time, distance, where we're going to be near a McDonald's, or near, that doesn't make any sense really, but there's a dinner party and I'm in the kitchen. That's a 70 and not a 90. 90 is in the room at the dinner table with 20 people I don't know. You can do a distance or time. You can do like 3 days, a week before. So one of the cards, like number 4, might be it's a day before. My anxiety is like a 20. The point is that you help them get over the anxiety of each of those situations so gradually that the last one, is going to be easy to get over. So now this is not exposure, right? You can do this in exposure fashion where you just use a Pavlovian thing, like you just sit with the anxiety till it goes away. That's not what this is, but there are versions of this that are pure extinction/exposure. That is not systematic desensitization. It's systematic exposure. This is systematic desensitization, which means you are going to do relaxation training with them. And then in each situation, you're going to condition the feelings of relaxation to that situation. Pavlovian, conditioning relaxation instead of anxiety to that situation. All right, and you can't be relaxed and anxious at the same time. So if you're conditioning relaxation, so you get the person fully relaxed when you do this, and you're starting to go through the hierarchy, fully relaxed. You read them situation number 1. The book gives specifics about this. There's so many times that I'm going to tell you the key things. So they're totally relaxed. If they get through like 30 seconds of it, you go again. It's okay, all right, so you're at McDonald's with your best friend. Picture it. And if they have no anxiety, you go on to the next one. Now, when you go on to the next one, might be, McDonald's with 3 friends. Maybe that's a little more anxiety provoking, so they got like a 25 or something. But it's only item 2. Usually do 10. There's no law against doing more or less. So you say, okay, I want you to imagine you're at McDonald's with your 3 friends. Right? Person's okay. Then you do it again. All right, start over, relax. So you start them off totally relaxed for each one, right? So you're totally relaxed. All right, situation. If they start to feel anxiety, like suppose in the one I just gave you, they start to feel anxiety, they're supposed to raise their finger. And as soon as they raise the finger, you go to the previous hierarchy item. So we were on number 2, you'd go and you start over at number 1. If you're on 4, you go back to number 3. So you just keep conditioning, associating the relaxation with the situations so that situations similar aren't going to have as much anxiety. So that's basically systematic desensitization. The reason I bring it up, it's very powerful. It's one of those things you'll never see in a movie because, it's not exciting at all. A lot of therapy is kind of painstaking, taking time, doing this, doing that. That's good behavior therapy. It's very powerful. And systematic desensitization is very powerful. But it's not very exciting, especially on Netflix. You'll never see a show on systematic desensitization or one of the characters going through a whole thing of systematic desensitization. It's going to bore the hell out of the audience. Um, so that's basically systematic desensitization. And you're going to learn how to do it next semester, but I want you to be familiar with that and the skills training from this chapter. Like I said, there are other things here, the modeling, but they're able to do a pretty good job. Self-management, again, one of those things like, well, you can have a plan. Suppose you're eating Oreos all the time. It could be carbohydrates. You want to get off that. You're going to set up a little plan of what, and true behavioral, what are you going to be doing instead? Right? So I'm going to be buying this at the store. I'm going to have these snacks available instead. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do, I'm going to monitor how often, and then going to reward themselves for so much, say, lengths of time for not eating something carbohydrate or eating something else or doing some relaxation thing or exercising instead. Let me go over a lot of that. So reaching small goals is important too, as part of this, rewarding themselves. All right, so the last section, client reaction to behavioral interventions. People like the plan, the specificity. You have to explain to them, you have to teach them Skinner principles, like they do with parents for parent training. You have to teach them Skinner, right? Like from an intro psych book. And then you go from there. The different and often painful work of changing fixed and established behavior patterns. You got to keep records of stuff. You've got to follow through on your plan. And you got to do that day after day. You keep a chart, although that's pretty reinforcing. Anytime you're going to try behavior change, you've got to keep a chart. You have to have a chart, a big visual, old school. Put it on your computer, but you have to have some sort of chart. Daily practice, the homework, the accurate record keeping, all that stuff. Therapeutic Alliance, as always. Okay. I'd love to go over some of these things in class, but so you see that systematic desensitization assignment in the you're not assigned to do this, but the exercises, the type of hierarchy, spatiotemporal. So it'd be how close they are to something or how far away in time they are from being exposed to that something. Let me just show you real quick. Get towards the end here. So there are apps for that, and I wish I knew more about these apps. I really should, but so this is an app. I don't know if it's still on there. I went on Google Play and hit Phobia app. That's probably so uncool that I did put the word app in the search engine there, but I don't care really. There are a bunch of them. There are a bunch of them. But this one, and I didn't dig too far, didn't hit the right terms in the search engine on Google Play. I think I went on Apple, iTunes. I don't do Apple stuff. That's just all brainwash. That's just pure brainwashing, the whole Apple thing. Is you do this yourself. Now, I don't know if this is true systematic desensitization where you have to do a relaxation training first, and then when you're exposed to each item in the hierarchy, you kick in your relaxation, you relax, and then if you feel anxiety, you go back to the previous item. But this is an example of so this might just be gradual exposure, where you just kind of sit with something that's mildly anxiety provoking. You sit with it till it extinguishes. You might do this for a week or two. And then when you see that low hierarchy stimulus with when you have no anxiety to it, you go on to the next one and you just sit with it. No relaxation. So I forget if this one has a relaxation component. But this is for a spider phobic. You can get it. This app was called Phobia Free when they did spiders. So this is like low hierarchy on the item. Little cute spider hat, right? How much anxiety is that going to provoke in a spider phobic? So that's the first hierarchy item. I feel like we've done this before. So yeah, there's all kinds of apps. This is higher up. I don't think this is low fear. I don't have a spider phobia, but it's not like I, want to have photos of them around my room. But that doesn't look like a low fear item to me. On a web, yeah, that's got to be up there. That's not number 2. Like the second hierarchy item here would probably be like he doesn't have the hat on or she doesn't have the hat on, right? Then 3. And then there's this one, which is a little higher up. And I think there's one more. Yeah, there's one more. That's pretty much at the top of the hierarchy. Okay? Yeah. So that's how you create a hierarchy. Like I said, that may not be true systematic desensitization, and I hope that you understand the difference there between systematic desensitization and systematic exposure. And if not, ask me next Tuesday. Okay, so I'm going to stop part 1 there, and I will have part 2 up for you also, and that's going to be on the cognitive stuff. Okay. Hope you're having a good evening or day. I know some of you are just laying on the couch listening to this.